the matter between Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and the Hawks criminal or political? Is the country on the verge of losing yet another finance minister after Nene? Is it not the right time for Minister Gordhan to prove his innocence before a court of law? And is South Africa's economy teetering on the brink of collapse? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Paul. Said the standoff between Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and the Hawks took an ugly turn earlier today following the NPA's issuing a summons on charges or alleged charges of fraud against him. The NPA head Sean Abrams indicated that the clandestine and covert operations of the so-called rogue unit were unlawful. He also indicated that the Finance Minister is expected to appear in court on 2nd November on charges including fraud and amounting to over 1 million rand. The amount is alleged to have been paid on behalf of a former SARS employee, Ivan Pillay. It was apparently supposed to be a penalty payable by Pillay to the government employees pension fund for taking early retirement. Meanwhile, the rand took a knock following the latest developments and was trading at 14.28. That is against the US dollar by midday. We are live and therefore you can call us and air your views. The numbers to dial 089-110-4210. Our Twitter handle at Question Time 24. My guests are Professor Pete Grokamp. He's a political scientist, and Lapam Peku is a senior research fellow at Trade Collective. But before we get into today's discussion, let's firstly talk to Tumaule Mhlaudu, our reporter in Pretoria. Some breaking news there, Tumaule. Apparently the BLA have they've won, or at least had the court's decision in their favor that they can camp and protest at the Public Protector's office.
That is exactly it, a moment of victory for the BLF and other parties that were represented here in court. And then, of course, the judge going on to make some very, very strong statements, saying that this application speaks to a disjuncture between those who are in positions of power and those who they are meant to be serving. He made allusions to the fact that the BLF and other interested parties were just basically expressing their democratic right to protest outside the Public Protector's office, and all they wanted was to have an audience with the Public Protector, the outgoing Public Protector, which they were not granted. Police were then called in. So he was very scathing in his criticism, but they are hailing this as a victory. However, the judge was also very careful not to completely condemn the Office of the Public Protector, saying that as long as the protesters also adhere to principles of democratic freedom of movement and not impede and not destroy property, which they haven't been doing, there's no issue and everyone can just coexist. And this is what the gist of the judgment is.
Madam Saudi, thank you very much for briefing us there. But indeed, before we get into today's show, let's firstly look at what the NPA had to say today.
Special Director of Public Prosecutions and Head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, Dr. Turi Pretorius SC, has decided that Mr. Pillay, Mr. Makashula and Mr. Gordhan must be prosecuted and arraigned on inter alia the following crimes. Count 1, fraud in respect of the 1,141,000 rand, 178 rand and 11 cents, whereby the aforementioned persons had misrepresented to the Government Employment Pension Fund and to SARS that Mr. Pillay was entitled to full pensionable benefits in terms of the employee-initiated severance package, which was implemented for transformation initiatives, whereas in fact the aforementioned persons knew well that the employee-initiated severance package was not applicable to Mr. Pillay.
Wow, that's the NPA, and like I said, my guest today, Pete Grokamp and Ms. Peku, they're joining us today. Now, But let me firstly get this clear. I'm not hearing anything about the rogue unit here.
That's it, because I think you'll remember that Professor Pierre de Vos and former Constitutional Court Judge Johan Kriegler already said that as far as the rogue unit, there probably is no charges. And after the book that was published, I think there's a general perception, even a legal perception, that maybe there's not really a charge. But you will notice that Abrams said they're still busy investigating that. They're still looking for the possibility of charges. They've since moved to a charge that we've been aware of against Gordhan of contravening the Public Management Finance Act. Again, the legal opinions that I've read said there is no charge there. And if you put that in the context of Abrams appealing the decision by a high court and an appeal court that the president should be charged, suddenly the thing starts to look as if there's a bit of a political motivation behind this. So we don't know, but one mistake we shouldn't make is to make a political judgment and extrapolate that to a legal judgment. Maybe there is a legal case against Pravin Gordhan. Maybe he has something to answer. But I think in the days to come we will see more and more legal opinions about that. And if he appears in court, then we will see really if the judge thinks there are charges or not.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I think to pick up on that, we have a history in this country of conflating legal and political matters. And I think in the public perception, it's become increasingly difficult to distinguish between the two. So the veracity of this now is now clouded by conspiracy theories and really a sense of mistrust and a sense in which there isn't a, entirely goodwill in some of these processes. Now, the NPA is at a rocky road in its formation. It's had accusations of not being entirely independent before. Bulelani Ngoka, if you remember correctly, was removed by the then President Mbeki because he thought that the police commissioner, Jackie Slavey, should be prosecuted.
Yes.
And of course, President Mbeki thought that it was not in the interests, the best interests. So when does this discretionary power that the president seems to have to decide what is in the best interest in terms of prosecuting come into play, and when does it not? So the distance and the stance in this instance by President Zuma, I mean, noticeable by his absence currently in Kenya with President Uhuru Kenyatta, if our sources are correct, is completely different. And I think that he's, perhaps strategic absence. And of course,
come on now, are you saying that the president is away so that?
I'm saying that there's a marked difference in the handling of this. Are we
supposed to read something into that?
I don't know, but I do think that there's an inconsistency in the way that the NPA has conducted itself. It has not always been easy to determine whether or not they are doing the bidding, they're bidding as a prosecutorial body. And of course, they have a huge discretion. Unlike some of the other institutions, they have a discretion of when to prosecute and when not to. Why now and why this and why him?
I think one must just be careful. If you keep on thinking that Jacob Zuma picks up the phone all the time and calling and then things happen, I think you might make a mistake. If there's a systemic problem, Abrams might be acting in the interest serve the president's interest, but I also think that he serves other people's interest. It's much broader than just the president. If there's something going wrong in a South African political system, it's not necessarily always the president.
No,
it might well be that the system has become so weak and so the authority has been so dispersed, so opportunistic, perhaps so patronage driven.
It can't be about the president. Obviously, it's a structural issue, and this is exactly the point, is that the conflation between legal and political issues have been a feature of our politics for so long.
Hold it there. Let's take Mashwani. I don't know, is it Mashwani or Mashwani? You in Naturena?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, I'm speaking to Paswani Kekana from Naturena.
Oh, Dr. Paswani, I'm very sorry. I was told it's Mashwani. Dr. Paswani,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to ask one question. When did the Hawk started questioning or investigating Pravin Gordhan? Is that after he was appointed or before? The charges were before, even before he was appointed as a finance minister? That is the only question that I want to ask.
But does it make any difference, Ltebel?
No, I just want to find out because we don't know whether he was questioned before, investigated before, or after. You understand? So that's why I want to find out, so that we must not say that it's a political motivated or what. You understand?
Okay, and that person.
Yes.
Well, but anyway, I guess
you'll remember when the Sunday Times put the stuff in the front paper, and there's a whole lot of accusations in your Hindu that even that was a planted story, and opportunistically the Sunday Times bought into it. Even then, before that, it was simmering. But I think the important thing here is the case against Pravin Gordhan came on the table after it was obvious that he became the enemy of the president. So that again, I'm not saying there's no legal case. I'm simply saying that I think, like CS agreed, it smells of too much politics. We're conflating politics and the legal issues here, and this thing. I think I'll bet my last dollar it will turn out to be politics. Even though I think, if I'm an analyst, I should give credence to the likeliness that there might be a legal case against Pravin Gordhan too. But if I've read Pierre de Vos correctly, he says there is no case, and he's laid out the law why there is no case. And his argument is there should be the intention to commit the crime or to abuse authority and power as stated in the law, and none of that can be proven by the Hawks or by the NPA.
Let's take Francois. Francois, welcome. You're in the Eastern Cape.
Good afternoon from windy city. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm well. It's quite windy also in the country, eh?
Yes, absolutely. Paul, my dear friend, as an ordinary South African citizen, to me, in my view, seems to me here's, a political game that's been played. Now let's backtrack a little bit. The state president has been accused of 250 million. Where was the MPA? Now, you look at the MPA and you wonder at times, is the MPA not a tool of maybe, political strings being, pulled from time to time? And now here is the Minister of Finance, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, who now all of a sudden, he was appointed a few months ago again as the Minister of Finance, and all of a sudden, this hullabaloo about, rogue unit involvement and all this. But wasn't the President aware of him being actually investigated, or as this thing just came up recently? Okay. Now all these kind of things. You wonder whether he did not actually approve of a lot of things, especially with the South African airlines and stuff. Now, I want to bet on this, that according to my observation, here's a political game that's been played. Now, this is going to plunge our country in deeper trouble again.
Okay, Francois, thank you very much for that call. Well, indeed, should we be worried, and I'm talking about the hoi polloi now?
The who?
The hoi polloi, the masses on the ground.
I think basically there are a couple of things that are quite interesting about that call. The one is the notion that this is about the narrative behind what we're being told. So remember that this comes in the wake of contestations between ESCOM, the Treasury, and the state, as well as the Ministry of Energy, around the nuclear deal, which is worth anything between 800 billion and 1.6 trillion rands, okay? And the Russians are involved, etc., etc. And we're aware that there's been a tension both with the former finance minister, former Minister Nene, and of course with Minister Gordhan around whether or not there was the efficacy of this. And now, Minister Nene had said that we should wait. We can't afford this. It would, wait until about 2025. Now there's a sudden move to accelerate this, and it was signed under the most secretive, covert circumstances, which a lot of observers have called into question and have called unconstitutional, in fact, and actually in contravention of a lot of PFMA regulations as well, in terms of disclosing public expenditure. Now, this feeds into the notion that different state-owned entities, including the SAA, are really there as some kind of how can I put it delicately, I can't, as a slush fund for particular interests, and that there's a way in which people are being postured or muscled in or out of positions if they are seen to be contravening or getting in the way of access to those resources. And I think that it really does call into question the rule of law, our systemic issues, and the kind of governance that we are trying to promote.
Itumeleng.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I hear what your guests are saying, especially what Mr. said there.
Yes.
And then I think it's very good sometimes to look at things in all directions. It's very good not to only concentrate on one way of thinking because of maybe we want to see Zuma as having a say in each and everything that is happening. But we should also ask ourselves, why was the scorpions removed? I don't think, and if maybe your guests can, after maybe I drop the phone, if maybe they can assist, why was the scorpions removed at the first place and then the NPA brought? You know, most of the things they will eventually become political. I think the ANC has brought this onto themselves by trying to control decisions of other institutions through these institutions of MPA, SIU, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Itumeleng. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we continue with our discussion. But also another question that we need to ask. Why can't Pravin face the law and it is not a matter that plunges their end? This is question time.
When we were little, life felt big, with something new to discover around every corner. Yet somehow, living small became the norm, until we remember how great living big really is. At Macro, we're still big on being big. Big on convenience, experience, range, and savings. Big on the moments that matter. Rediscover how beautiful it is to be big on life.
Another round?
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. Today, my guests are Professor Pete Grokamp. He's a political scientist, and she's a senior research fellow at Trade Collective. Tsepiso, welcome. Tsepiso?
I think we have a serious problem here in our country. We seem to be politicizing everything that has been happening here.
Yes.
Why can't we just let the law take its course? Because now we can go back to that public protector in the Nkandla matter. People who ate the money there, they were not arrested. Only 7 million from that 200 and something million came back. Now, to see that we are politicizing things, about 100 and something million is gone. Nobody knows where it is. We only say Zuma ate the money. Where did the money go? We should just let the law take its course and stop using our public institutions for political gains.
Okay, so thanks very much for the question. Well, but indeed, the question should be also, why can't the Minister of Finance go to court and we don't have to suffer?
Okay, that might be a good question, but at least 3 courts have suggested in their judgments that the president should stand trial as well. And the NPA has not even charged the president, but kept on referring the matter to the next court and the next court, which gives the impression that they do not want to charge the president. And then today, Sean Abrams said, without a sense of irony, he said, the days of members of the executive getting away with crimes, it's over now. I mean, really, did he think when he said that? Because there's somebody else that also needs to stand trial, and 3 courts have already suggested that. There's not a single court that has suggested that Pravin Gordhan should stand trial for anything. He's never been found guilty of anything, and a number of senior jurists have said that there is no case. There's an imbalance here.
Okay. You see, the problem is that once you have institutions, legal processes and political processes that are not applied consistently, it does call into question their veracity, and it does, of course, call into question whether or not there are political motives rather than legal, rather than solid legal grounds. And I think this is exactly an example of that. Our first citizen has dismantled state instruments such as the Scorpions in response to the other caller's question, which seem to be drawing closer to the scent and which seem to be closer to prosecuting. And I think that there's such a credibility deficit. I think it's very difficult now for most of the cabinet, including the executive, to pronounce on this because there is very little legitimacy. There's very little credibility.
Johan, you're in the Eastern Cape.
Yes, Paul, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
And great esteemed guest that you have there tonight.
Thank you.
I just want to throw a spanner in the toolbox here and say, why can't the citizens of South Africa put in a class action suit against NEC or the government for all the loss and damage they've caused in the last few years? Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, that's very economic and,
Not really. No, it's not per se. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, I think that the question there is also how do we claim back our state institutions? How do we claim back democracy? And I think that what's happening here is that there's a crisis in democratic institutions. There was a crisis with the public protector. We just had a strong character who was able to stand at the helm of that. There has been a crisis with the NPA. Vusi Pukoli previously, his issue or his situation is well documented, and he too was eventually vindicated. He was said to be not fit and not proper, and the Gunwala Commission thought differently, as did other international jurists there after the fact. So I think that the notion of a class action suit isn't something that unfortunately is available to the South African Constitution and to the South African citizenry. What is available to us, however, I think is a very strong civic participation culture of voicing our displeasure.
I'll come to you just now. Let me take George. George, you are in Mamelodi.
Yes, Mpo, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for the call, George.
Mpo, I just wanted to ask perhaps the panelists.
Yes.
The question of what is happening currently reminds me of what happened during Mbeki's time. When Mbeki was about to leave, Zuma was charged, and then now Zuma is charging this particular person. Now I'm asking myself, is history repeating itself?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, George, for that.
I just want to come back to something else. The idea of a class action, civil society taking a sort of a class action position again. We just call it something else. We call it an election. And in the last election, civil society has made it very clear that they're very suspicious what's going on. The ANC didn't lose the election, but it must be obvious to the ANC and to the government and to President Zuma that society is very, very suspicious about his intentions. And if it's not being understood by him and not being told to him by the opposition parties, within the ANC, more and more voices tell him that we plan to act against what we think you stand for. So there is a sort of a class action going on in any case.
But will it help Minister Gordhan to lobby, if I may use the word, the support the way that it has been happening, sadly.
Yes, it's been already happening. I mean, we had, you have people like George Bezos and, eminent,
crying there the other day.
Eminent voices already pretty much toying on behalf of the minister. Twitter account, Twitter handles, hands off our finance minister. It's all very, etc. Coming out to bat on his behalf. And, we see a breaking of ranks. That's the one thing. We see a breaking of ranks and a certain disintegration in relation to, the NEC the government, parliamentary institutions, the opposition. There's a disintegration, which is worrying, but it's also encouraging because I think that it illustrates that the monolith of power cannot hold.
What is now going to happen? Does he have to resign?
I don't think he should. I think it's I think it's a horrible precedent. I think it's the worst idea at a time like this when international investors, our own local production and manufacturing sector needs a boost in the arm. Our growth rate is no growth. We're stagnating.
But you can't have a Minister of Finance appearing in court on fraud and corruption charges. I mean,
it's just
you will
ridiculous.
have to either be suspended.
Or
I suspect there will be a cabinet reshuffle soon.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Yes, unfortunately. But yeah, that was question time for today. A big thank you to my guest and to you for watching the show. From me and the crew, you have yourself a wonderful time. Have a hot.